Don't quit, keep going. Once, in a forgotten corner of the world, there was a man named Kai. He wasn't a king, nor was he wealthy or famous, just an ordinary man living in a village where the dreams of many were quietly buried. Every day he woke up to the same tired routines, but there was one thing that set him apart. He had a secret, a burning desire to escape the ordinary and push towards something greater. But just like everyone else, he reached a point where it seemed impossible to continue. His feet ached, his mind was exhausted, and the path ahead felt like it was made of nothing but walls. There were days when giving up seemed like the only way out. And yet, in the silence of his struggle, a strange moment occurred. An unexpected twist in his story that made everything shift. You see, when most people would have turned around, Kai found something that no one else could see. A truth that remained hidden even from the wisest of his village. This isn't a tale about miraculous success. No, it's about something far deeper, far more mysterious. It's about the strength you can't see in yourself until you face the moment when everything tells you to stop. And that's when things got really interesting. For as long as Kai could remember, the village had been a place of quiet resignation. People woke, worked, ate, and slept, repeating the same motions day after day. The elders had long given up on their dreams. The younger ones, filled with idle hopes, seemed to have accepted the idea that this life, small and ordinary, was all they were ever going to have. But not Kai. His heart burned with an unspoken desire to break free from the life his ancestors had known. A desire so deep it whispered to him every night when the world around him went still. There is more, it said. There is something beyond this world of predictability, a greater calling waiting for you. It was a secret he could never share. The world had already decided for him that his place was here, that his path would be like everyone else's. But Kai refused to believe that. One evening, as the orange sun dipped behind the hills, he made a decision. He would leave. He would go into the vast unknown, away from the small confines of his village. At first, the journey felt exhilarating. The wind against his face, the thrill of freedom, the promise of something greater. It was the very stuff of legends. For a brief moment, Kai believed that he was one of the few who could actually break free. His dream seemed to be in his grasp. But the moment he stepped into the wilderness, the world began to change. The first day was easy. His steps were light, his heart full of excitement. But as the days passed, the path grew steeper, the winds colder, and the nights longer. The woods, once mysterious and inviting, began to close in on him. He started to hear strange noises in the darkness, creatures lurking just beyond his sight. The shadows seemed to whisper doubts, feeding on his growing fears. Kai had never known loneliness like this. The isolation gnawed at his confidence, and soon the thrill of his escape turned into something darker. What was he doing out here, far away from everything he knew? The doubts were so loud, they drowned out his purpose. By the third night, when the moon hung low in the sky like a silent witness, Kai was ready to turn back. He had no strength left to go further. His feet were sore, his body weak, and the hunger gnawed at his belly like a relentless tide. Maybe this is it, he thought. Maybe I wasn't meant for this after all. Maybe I should return and live the life they all expect of me. He lay down on the cold ground, staring up at the stars, his mind lost in the weight of his own uncertainty. But just as the doubt threatened to swallow him whole, a flicker of something caught his eye. A faint glow, almost imperceptible, flickered in the distance. It was a light, not like any he'd seen before, something that didn't belong in the wilderness. Without thinking, his legs moved toward it. What he found wasn't what he expected. It was a clearing, unlike any place he had come across before. The trees around it were ancient, towering over him like guardians of a forgotten secret. The light, soft and shimmering, was coming from a single stone at the center. It wasn't just a stone. It was a relic, something old, ancient, and alive with energy. Kai knelt beside it, mesmerized by the pulsating glow. The stone seemed to hum with a quiet power, and for a moment he felt as if the very earth beneath him was breathing. The exhaustion, the doubts, the fear, everything he had carried with him melted away in the presence of this mysterious object. But then, the voice spoke. It wasn't a voice like any he had heard before. It was a deep, resonating sound, like a whisper carried on the wind, yet it filled his entire being. It spoke without words, without form, and yet it was as clear as anything he had ever known. Everything you seek is within you, it said. You must not stop now. Kai's heart pounded in his chest as the truth washed over him. He had spent his life searching for something beyond the ordinary, thinking it was out there, somewhere in the unknown. But the stone, the light, it wasn't telling him to seek the answer outside himself. It was within him all along. He rose slowly, understanding that this moment was not just a sign, but a revelation. The journey had never been about reaching a distant destination. It had been about uncovering the strength he never knew he had. The next morning, Kai awoke with a newfound purpose. The doubts still lingered, but they no longer had the same power over him. The wilderness with its danger and uncertainty had become a place of learning. He continued his journey step by step, but this time he was not afraid. The world around him had not changed. It was still wild, still unknown, still challenging, but something inside him had shifted. The path ahead was no longer something to fear. It was a challenge to be conquered, one moment at a time. It wasn't long before Kai reached the edge of the village. His return was quiet. There were no grand celebrations, no fanfare, just the familiar faces that had watched him leave. They didn't know what he had learned. They didn't know that the greatest adventure of all had been the one he took within himself. Kai didn't have the answers to give them. He didn't need to. His journey had been his own, and the lessons he had learned were his to carry. The world hadn't changed, but he had. As he walked back through the village, he realized that there was one thing he had missed all along. The real adventure wasn't about escaping the ordinary. It was about learning to embrace the challenge of the unknown and finding the courage to keep going, no matter how difficult it seemed. And so, Kai kept going. He didn't quit. Even in the face of doubt, when the world seemed impossible, when everything told him to turn back, he kept moving forward. And that's the secret he uncovered. Sometimes the greatest strength lies in not giving up, in pushing through the moments when everything seems to be falling apart. If you've ever felt like the world is against you, like you're ready to quit, remember this story. Remember Kai, the man who refused to turn back, even when every sign told him to stop. What would you do if you had that same strength? Leave a comment below and share your thoughts. Have you ever faced a moment when everything seemed to be falling apart, but you kept going anyway? And what did you discover when you did? Like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and stay tuned for the next part of the journey. Trust me, you won't want to miss what's coming next.